Thank you. Thank you very much. It is indeed a pleasure to be here. I love being with live audiences. And I say that truthfully because I get so much pleasure and I get so much input from what you have to say to me non-verbally as I talk about non-verbals. And what we're going to talk about today is something that I think is very important. And that is the power of body language. And body language has its own power because it is the principal way by which we humans communicate. We think we're very smart. We think that it's through texting or email or through our words. But in fact, the research tells us that we principally communicate non-verbally. Now, I've seen numbers that go anywhere from 60% to 80% to 90%. Now, here's a secret. Nobody knows. And the reason nobody knows, it's because it's contextual. You could be dating somebody, and you're sitting at a cafe, and both of you are leaning forward, your head's tilted, and the communication may be 90%. Or you may be at a technical meeting, and it may be down to around 50%. But we know this. Interpersonal communication is never zero, and it is always most likely higher than 50%. That's an astounding number. So, well, what is nonverbal communication? What is body language? Well, body language is the language of our physical self. It is the way we express ourselves. We use our arms. The arching of our eyebrows is body language. Or head tilt is body language. So's the tone of speech. You've all said hi to somebody. Hi. Hi. You see the difference? It's how we say things. This is considered a nonverbal. And the definition of nonverbal, and my definition of nonverbal, is very simple. Anything that communicates a message, but is not a word. But is not a word. So when I see people dress up, and they're getting all fancied up because they're going to a wedding, that communicates a message. We are in harmony with something that's about to happen. In the same way that when someone says something and we kind of question what they're saying, we squint our eyes. We're communicating something. So all nonverbals have meaning. This isn't the 1960s where we sort of doubted, well, this may mean that or that may mean this. We now fairly much understand that all behavior has meaning because it's all controlled by the brain. So unless you have some sort of disorder, for instance, Tourette's syndrome, everything you do, even while you're sleeping, researchers look at how you sleep. They can tell if you're dreaming, REM. They can tell if you're fitful. But certainly when you're awake, everything you do, whether you're leaning forward, whether your eyes are arched and attentive, if your hand is on your chin and you're pensive, it's all communicating what the brain is feeling, thinking, processing, even desiring. How many of you have never noticed a child who sees candy and you see the desire in their eyes? Or maybe some of you, when you go buy a nice car and you go, whoa. And we're communicating desire. And so we are primed to communicate non-verbally. The things that we think, where should we go today? The things that we feel, oh, that's terrible. The things that we desire. Even the things that we intend. I'll give you an example of this. Have you ever noticed Children, when they're excited and then they want to go run outside and play, they lean in the direction of the door. But literally, it's like magnetically they're being pulled by the front door. Yeah, Mom, yeah. We reveal our intentions. We reveal our intentions. And of course, in my work, formerly in the FBI, we often saw criminals casing a store right before they're going to rob it. We all remember that famous scene from that Clint Eastwood movie where the bank robber's sitting outside and he's having one cigarette after another because he's stressed. And these little things we pick up throughout life and they communicate to us. And what's fascinating about the research is that we now know that babies, beginning at about 3 weeks, are very effectively communicating to us. And those of you who have children know this. Have you noticed that when you make faces at your baby, they mirror those faces? You smile, they smile. This is part of the new research that the Italians started doing about 15 years ago with what are called the mirror neurons. And we mirror each other because it's a fast track to learning. The baby sees the mom smile, the baby smiles. And we do the same thing. We go to a football game and somebody scores a touchdown and everybody raises their hand and yells, "Yay!" Nobody goes, "Whoa." And yet no memo was issued. We know what to do because we are primed to mirror each other so that we learn and so that we can be as one. And it's a fascinating field of study. And nonverbal communications studies have really been multiplied in the last few years. So we know that all nonverbal communications has meaning. We also know that nonverbal communications, body language, is reflexive. And it's fluid. And what we mean by that is this. Someone says something to you, and you look at it with a little bit of doubt, and then they have a little bit of doubt. It's reflexive. Or someone greets you in a way that's not what you expected. You expect them to come through the door and go, "Hey, Joe," and they go, "How you doing?" And all of a sudden, you react to that. So it's reflexive, and it's fluid. And it's fluid. It can change in an instant. Now, one of the beautiful things about body language is that we demonstrate what we think, what we feel, what we desire, what we intend in real time. Right now. We don't have a bad experience, like we almost hit the car in front of us, right? Have you ever noticed that if you almost hit the car in front of you, you all go, this is called a pacifier. We're going to talk about that later. It's universal. We do it all over the world. Now, what's interesting about that is that we do it in real time. We don't have almost an accident and then wait 2 hours later and then go, "I think we're ready now." We pacify ourselves. We relieve this stress. We soothe ourselves right now. Right now. And that's why when we hear bad news, when we don't like what someone says, we can notice it. We can sense it because we evolved to communicate to each other non-verbally instantly. Instantly. So that we as the collective benefit from each other's observations. So if we're in a group together and we're starting to walk across the street and the person in the lead sees a car dangerously close, he stops. And we evolve to notice that behavior. And when one stops, we all stop. We don't have to go through the same experience. And that's why at the football game, when one jumps up and is really excited, Right? I mean, I've been to games. Sometimes I just don't want to do the wave, but I have to because it's synchronous, it's harmonious. It adds to the collective experience. And so we sense the wave coming and we do it. And this is a form of communication. Harmony with others is a form of communication. And we've all had conversations with people where we're okay, but they're stressing over something. They're stressing over something. And so right then and there, we begin to see that there are issues. Now, we know that a large amount of communication is nonverbal. Some of it is chemical. You've probably never noticed, but when people stand very close to you, the wings of your nose dilate so you can absorb their chemistry. You certainly see it in dating. With young people, we're trying to absorb their chemistry. So we communicate visually, we communicate chemically, and this goes on all the time. But non-verbally, we're constantly assessing each other. Now notice I didn't say judging each other, we're assessing each other. You're at an ATM machine, somebody comes up and stands too close to you and you're doing one of these. That's a nonverbal. Your body is reacting to the presence of someone close by. And so you react and say, why is this person so close to me? Non-verbally, we're reacting to the world around us. We reveal our emotions non-verbally. We don't say to each other, I'm crying. We cry. We sob. Our shoulders sink. Our legs shake. Our fingers tremble. We communicate honestly, non-verbally. We communicate our insecurities. I teach at the university, and I see young students on test day, and they're biting their nails, and there's a lot of facial touching, a lot of neck touching. Why? Because they've been watching TV and not studying. And then you see the confident students, they come down, and you don't see these displays. And if you've ever wondered why it is that your teacher always knew when you weren't prepared, it's because she or he was reading your body language that says, I don't know what I'm doing. That's why. That's why. Things such as your personality. Now, obviously, you all dress yourself. Your parents didn't do that. And yet, how we dress, how we choose to groom ourselves, whether or not we groom ourselves, is a nonverbal. And obviously psychiatrists look for this. For instance, when people are clinically depressed, their body tends to be slumped. The clinically depressed, in fact, cannot defy gravity. I'll talk about gravity-defying behaviors later. Gravity-defying behaviors when you sort of bounce into a room, you're confident, right? Nobody walks into the psychiatrist and says, hey, doc, I'm really, depressed. But in fact, the reason that they can't do it, the reason that they can't defy gravity and have that bounce in their step is that we have this very elegant system in our brain called the limbic system. The limbic brain. We have a very primitive area of the brain that controls the heart and the lungs, and that's why you can have an accident of the head and be in a persistent vegetative state, but you're really not thinking. It just regulates your organs and so forth. And then we have this very rather exquisite limbic system, which controls all emotions and controls your survival. It's in charge of survival. It does no thinking. We evolved this area of the brain to do absolutely no thinking because had we evolved to think about everything, so someone comes in with a very large cobra and throws it in front of us, and if we had sat there saying, gee, I hope it's friendly, we would have died out as a species. For in fact, we evolved that whenever there's a threat, we have three behaviors. We have three behaviors. And the first one is the freeze response. That's why oftentimes you say, why didn't they get out of the way? Why didn't they move? Why are they frozen like deer? Because we evolved to have a freeze response so that we can assess for danger, number one, and number two, because movement attracts predators. Movement attracts predators. So by freezing, we evolved so that if something's looking for us, they can't see us. The second behavior we evolved is to distance ourselves. Now, you've heard of fight or flight, correct? Right. It's wrong. For in fact, if it was fight or flight, we would be exhausted and bruised. We evolved to freeze first, flight second, distance ourselves, and fight as a last alternative. Now, in modern day, we distance ourselves not by running, but by leaning away. You said, what? And fighting, we now argue. We don't really get into fights, hopefully. So we have this elegant brain that protects us, that reacts to the world, doesn't think. And then, of course, there's the newer brain, the neocortex, that does all the higher thinking. But the limbic area and all the behaviors I'm going to share with you today come from the limbic brain. These are not cultural. Cultural nonverbals is, for instance, how we say hi. So in America, how do we say hi, right? We go, hey, how are you, right? Maybe in South America, when they say, come here, they go like this. That's cultural. Shaking hands is cultural. In some parts of the world, they don't shake hands. They hug each other. It's a wonderful system. We are, to a certain extent, slightly beholden to culture, but it is our limbic brain that dominates us. And it controls and regulates what our actions will be and how we will respond to things. And it takes primacy over everything else. I'll say that again. Our limbic brain takes primacy over everything else because it's responsible for survival. How many of you have been in an argument and then about 20 minutes later, after you've calmed down, you thought of all the clever words you should have said? We've all been there. This is called limbic hijacking. Because it's you're in emotional turmoil, the limbic brain hijacks neural activity, so you don't do any high-order thinking. And that's why when I'm stressed, I can't find the keys. I can't even find where I parked my car because I'm stressed, because the limbic brain is hijacking high-order thinking. And the elegance of that is that limbic behaviors are honest behaviors. That's the honest part of the brain. It doesn't know how to lie. I'll give you an example. By the way, what do you think is the most honest part of the body? Well, I'm going to tell you. It's not the face. What? That's right. Because how many times did your mother said to you, don't make that face, when you were being honest? She gave you something and you go, oh, don't make that face. So at an early age, we're taught to lie. We're taught to conceal honestly our reactions. But there's one part of your body that doesn't know how to do that. And that's your feet. And your feet are the absolute most honest part of your body, not your face. Now, how does that play out? You're on top of a building and you want to look over that ledge and it's 50 stories down. Nobody runs over to the ledge. Here's what you do. You inch over. So your limbic brain says, listen, I know you're all courageous and everything, but I'm not going to let you do it. I am not going to let you run over to the ledge. And that's why you see little children and you say to them, kiss grandmother. And maybe they've never seen grandmother before. Maybe they're just not comfortable kissing their uncle or whatever. And that's why when they go to kiss them, they go like this. You see, the limbic brain says, I don't feel comfortable with this person. I'm not going to allow my feet to go near them. I'll kiss them, but not the feet, because the feet are responsible for my survival, for escape. And that's why in interpersonal relationships between husband and wife, boyfriend and girlfriend, whatever the relationship is, one of the first indicators that the relationship is in trouble is their feet will not go near each other. The feet will distance each other. They'll hold hands. But boy, the minute they touch feet, they alarmingly move the feet away. In fact, the feet are so honest. You can try this later. If you stand in an elevator and cross your legs while you're riding on the elevator, this is a, by the way, high comfort display. The minute strangers come into that elevator, you will undo the feet. You will just undo it. And here's what's interesting. If there's alcohol on their breath, you'll do it even faster because you know that you are a potential victim. And so your feet undo themselves and say, no, you be ready to escape and evade. And that's the beauty of the limbic brain. It doesn't think about this, it reacts to it. And so if you look at videos of, where there's been robberies and so forth, you see people realize, oh my gosh, something's going on, and you see them beginning to distance themselves. And we distance ourselves with our feet. But we also distance ourselves with our ventral side. So we have the dorsal side, right? Dorsal fin. We have our ventral side, our bellies. And here's how it works out. Somebody says something we don't like, and we go, really? And we turn away. In fact, I have a little saying that you can remember. Belly away, don't like what you say. And it's extremely accurate. And that's why you can watch shows on TV and you can turn the sound off as I do. I really don't want to know what they have to say. But I know how they're reacting to each other through their body language. And they'll literally turn away from each other. This is called ventral denial. When they don't like something that's said, or they don't like that person. And we pick up on these little things. So somebody walks through the door and maybe we've had a bad experience with them and we go, oh, hi, how are you? And we find ourselves leaning away. Okay, in the FBI, we call that a clue. We deny them our ventral side. And if you remember the old pictures of Prince Charles and Diana, that final year, you don't see their bellies facing each other. They would sit in a car and actually, literally, ventrally deny each other. And this is what we do. This is what we do. And this is useful to us because you may be, for instance, managing a company or managing individuals or selling a product. And as you're dealing with someone, or as you are discussing a product, you sense something's going on here, and you see ventral denial, they're not interested. You see, because we lean towards the things we like. We ventrally front. She said she likes me? Hello. Vroom. He said he likes me? I won the prize? Huh? We turn towards and lean towards the things we like and away from the things that we don't, by matters of degree. And we do this subconsciously. But what's fascinating about nonverbals is how much we do nonverbally. Think about this. Trust, truthfulness, veracity, empathy. Empathy. Everybody talks about empathy. Loyalty, leadership, authority. We transmit this non-verbally. One of my favorite examples is a gentleman named Colin Powell. I had the pleasure of meeting him years ago. He absolutely won't remember me, but I remember him. Magnificent man. When he walks into a room, he exudes authority. He exudes competency. And that's before he opens his mouth. And you say, how does he achieve that? In the same way that you can. In the very same way that you can. Because he has that power, and so do you. He does it through his nonverbals, through his presence. You see, when he walks into a room, he commands the room. But he doesn't have to say a word. His movements are smooth. Good leaders have smooth movements. Bad leaders are jittery. What we used to call, nervous and has a tic or whatever. We appreciate good leaders when they have these smooth, grand gestures. He uses his hands to communicate. You see, you can have a great audience and you're talking to them, but it won't register if you say, "Hi, my name is Joe. I'm honest. Work with me." That doesn't work. You see, all of us, we humans, assess each other. We do the due diligence of each other non-verbally. We decide who to associate with, who to marry, who to trust based on non-verbals, not on verbals. And we never have. We never have. So what are the things that we can look for? Well, I said that our brain reacts to the world around us. It reacts to things we see, think, right? You've seen someone walking down the street. Maybe you've done it yourself, and all of a sudden they hit their forehead. Oh, they forgot something. A physical reaction to a thought. We react to our environment in real time. So what do we look for? Well, let me just give you what I think is the most useful model. It's not the perfect model, maybe there isn't one, but for me it's been the most useful model. And the most useful model that I came up with is this, because when I looked at the 300, 400 books that were written on body language, I didn't like the way they were written. And so when I wrote my books, I said, how would you have wanted to be taught? And I reduced it to this. Always be looking for comfort and discomfort. Because we as a species, if I can use Desmond Morris's term, are transmitting to each other comfort and discomfort from the moment we are born. And so that baby comes out from that warm womb and it's in the cold air and it cries. Discomfort. It soils its pants and there's discomfort. The mother cleans the baby and she holds him in the hands and we have comfort. We look at the stock market today and we go, ugh, discomfort. All of a sudden it rises. Pretty good. We get good news, comfort. When we feel strong about something, we're emphatic, we're confident, we emphasize. That comes under comfort. When we see something we have doubt about, When we're insecure, we have discomfort. And if you just use that model, of comfort and discomfort, you're going to be able to see things starting today that you have never seen before. You're going to be able to pick up on the thoughts, desires, intentions, and issues that other people have, sometimes before they even utter it. You will become supremely more empathetic because you are going to become a better observer. The key to any success in this planet, in this world, is the ability to observe and to communicate. Every great discovery is based on that. Your parents did a great job with you because they were observing you and attending to you. They were observing your nonverbals and reacting to you. So we use this model of comfort and discomfort to guide us. This isn't very complicated. It's very binary. Just look for comfort and discomfort. Now there's a lot more to nonverbals, but if you just do this, you will see things that you have missed in the past. You will be able to apperceive things that people are thinking, feeling, and intending. Now, coupled with comfort and discomfort, I want you to look for things such as pacifiers. Now, everybody understands pacifiers, right? Pacifiers are anything that soothe us. Now, babies use pacifiers, but we adults use pacifiers, right? So we wring our hands, we play with our hair. You've seen women playing with their hair, and my daughter used to curl her hair to sleep, right? You've seen that. You've seen people biting their lips at the airport, right? They're doing this. Do you know why we bite our lips? Because we can't suck our thumbs anymore. It doesn't look good at my age. I want to suck my thumb, but social convention says no. So what do? They're canceling flights, and I'm doing this. I'm pacifying, which is why we exhale when we almost hit the car in front of us, which is why we touch our necks and touch our face and wring our hands and play with jewelry to soothe us. In fact, any repetitive behavior is a pacifying behavior. And you've seen people whose leg bounces up and down. I know it drives my wife crazy. Or you've seen people take a pencil and just beat it on their hand, right? Or they strum their fingers on a desk or against their face. It's a repetitive behavior, therefore it is a soothing behavior. All pacifying behaviors are required by the brain. I'll say that again. All pacifying behaviors are required by the brain. It is not optional. You don't have an option in this. And that's why when you see something stressful or you go through something stressful, you are pacifying. You're rubbing your hands on your forelegs, or you're moving your hands around this way or that way. It's because your brain requires it. It's not optional. So we have pacifiers, and I want you to look for pacifiers because pacifiers follow stressful things. Pacifiers follow anything that is an issue to you. Pacifiers follow anytime you feel threatened. Pacifiers follow anytime you get to something that presents as a problem. And there's any number of pacifiers, and they usually involve hand-to-body touching or, like I said, playing with objects. Now, something that every business person should know, And that is that we can transmit information. It's not just about issues. And one of the things that I want you to do from this day forward, now we all know about the smile, how powerful it is. When we walk through a door, somebody smiles. We love that, right? I want you to think about something that is really not written about a lot in the literature, but is extremely powerful. And that's head tilt. Head tilt we reserve for when we have comfort. That's why you see it between mother and child, or father and child. That's why you see it, when you're with your physician as you're telling them your plight and they tilt their head. And what head tilt communicates to other people is, I'm not judging you, I'm receptive to what you're saying. Imagine the difference in your own life if every time somebody comes to you, maybe your children or maybe somebody at work, if every time they come to you and they're standing there looking like this, go ahead, tell me your problem. Well, after a while, they're not going to. But what a difference if you can tilt your head. You see, it exposes the weakest area of our body. And it says, I trust you enough, I care about you enough to expose myself. And what it communicates is, go ahead, tell me what you have to say. And what we find is, people reveal things to you. Much more so than if you are maintaining that, what's traditionally be called, that stiff neck. Because people are assessing us just as we're assessing them. They're going to be looking at you and saying, do I see comfort and discomfort? Or do I see indicators of stress? And so as we go through the body, I want you to think about where on the body I'm seeing discomfort. Now, I talked about ventral denial. I talked about foot withdrawal, where we move the feet away. But let's go through some of these, right? So when we're comfortable with other people, the orbits of our eyes are wide. Our facial muscles are relaxed. The minute there's an issue, the minute that there's discomfort, the orbits of the eyes narrow, right? You've all seen the Clint Eastwood movies, right? He's ready to shoot somebody. He didn't go, hey. What did he do? He squinted. Squinting is how we react to the world around us when we have issues. Now, we don't know what those issues may be. The facial tension, the furrowing of the forehead, which unfortunately is now masked by Botox. And it just throws everything out the window. Right? The nose crinkle. We've all seen it. Babies do it at 48 hours. They smell something they don't like and they go, right? We look at a contract, we get to article number 7 in the contract and we don't like it, and we go, we crinkle our nose in an instant. What Paul Ekman calls a micro gesture, I call a gesture. It's a very fast gesture, but it's a very accurate one because it says I don't like. Or the lips, right? Someone's saying to us, hey, let's go here, and you're thinking, let's go somewhere else. And we know that lip pursing, right? You can all do it. It's like a kiss, so I know you all can do it. Lip pursing means I disagree with you, or I'm thinking something alternatively. And so even before they utter the word, I can already see that they're in disagreement. Why? They may be nodding their head, acknowledging what you're saying, but their lips are saying, I don't think so. If you don't believe me, just go see your boss and say, am I going to get a raise? And he goes, no. No. Our chins. Chin high, chin firm, confidence. You see this often with politicians. They're asked a question that they don't like and they go, well, we'll have to think about that. Thank you very much. I know now that there are issues. How do I know? Because we withdraw our chin whenever we're bothered by something. When we're confident, we stick it out. In the same way that your dog tucks its ears in. We tuck our chin in when we have doubts or insecurities. And beyond that, our necks. Maybe you've never thought about your necks as revealing information about you. But notice how often when people talk about something that is distasteful or bothersome, or where they lack confidence as they're talking about these things, they're touching their neck. Yeah, I think we can do that. No. Right? Neck touching. You'll see this from this day forward. There are issues there. There are insecurities there. And I see this on campus a lot. You see the young lady, she's on the phone and she's covering her neck. And she says, "Oh my goodness, that creep is just down the hall. Oh, he's gone now. He's back." And you see the covering of literally what's the suprasternal notch. Now, men mask it by fixing their tie. Women touch this neck dimple, and you'll see it gets red. And it communicates very clearly there's something at issue here. Discomfort, insecurities, concerns. We all remember Rodney Dangerfield, right? Ventilating. Yeah, he's pulling on his shirt, right? But we ventilate in other ways. You ask somebody a question and they pull on their jacket. Ah, yeah, July, I think. Why are they ventilating? Here's the secret. We ventilate when something's at issue, when something's bothering us. We might pull on the shirt. We might pull on the jacket. We might pull on the buttons of the shirt. Women will lift the hair off their neck. We all ventilate in some way when there are issues. Now, notice I haven't said anything about deception, and I'm not. I'll talk about deception because this is a whole separate area. But I want you to become observers as I became an observer, so that when you see these behaviors, when you see the person with their hands on their chin and they're pensive, and you differentiate that from the person who you ask them a question and now they briskly rub their face, there are issues. This is different because hand-to-body touching is to relieve stress primarily, and the brain requires it. Now, you've all heard of people, I'm often asked the question, well, what about crossing your arms in front of you? Here's the truth about that. And I've read a lot of junk out there that said, well, this means we're blocking you out and so forth. Nonsense. For in fact, we cross our arms mostly in public because it provides us comfort. It's soothing. It's like a self-hug. We don't do it at home because we don't need to. So you see it more in public than you do in private. Now, it is true. Some people, when they're very upset, they cross their arms and they grasp each other very tightly. But that's different. So we're communicating to each other in real time this comfort and discomfort. And when we get down to, for instance, the hips, when we feel discomfort, our hips become very tight. They're not as free to move around. And you certainly see this with couples. When the relationship is going south, their hips will not go near each other. They'll hold hands, but as they come towards each other, they'll actually move their hips away, just as the feet move away. And you'll see this from this day forward. There's just something that is forcing them apart at a very subconscious level. Now, I'm not talking about good relationships or relationships that are extremely comfortable. I'm talking about relationships where there are issues. But you also see it in the workplace. I don't want to sit next to that person. I don't want to stand next to that person. or you see them literally move away. Distancing behaviors is something negative. It's just something negative. And as we work our way down to the feet and the legs, you see the pacifiers with the person sitting at the desk, and you ask them a question, will that be done by tomorrow? And they rub their legs a couple of times. It is not going to be done by tomorrow. Because this is a pacifier. Maybe it'll get done, but there are issues. Now, how beautiful this is that you can see these behaviors and say, is there anything that I can do to help you? And when I walk through campus and I see young ladies in particular who are struggling with something, and you see the pacifying behaviors, they're touching their neck, they're biting their lips. It's an opportunity to say, are you okay? Is something wrong? Waiting for a ride, missed my ride, just broke up, whatever. But that's the beauty of nonverbals. It gives us insight so that we can be empathetic. Because now and in the future, what will differentiate you from everybody else in whatever you do is the ability to observe and to demonstrate empathy. Because anybody can be bland. Anybody can be neutral. Anybody can walk through life with blinders on. But if you know how to exercise empathy by observing behaviors, now you become something truly special. Now you're really special. Now you have a skill that very few people have, and people will gravitate to you because you have that skill. And it's wonderful that we transmit this information. In our hands transmit information. Did you know that if you give a presentation and you stand behind a podium and people don't see your hands, that you are perceived as being less dynamic and less honest? Those are not small things. That when juries look at people testifying and if they don't see the hands, they perceive them as being deceptive. And so all of a sudden now the use of hands becomes important. How we use our hands to transmit information. How many of you have received a bad handshake? We've all received bad handshakes. Let's see, my first one was in 1968. It was followed by 1970. We remember these things. This is the first time humans touch each other. And you say, how can you screw up a handshake? A lot of people do. They want to play jujitsu, or they hand you a hand that's wet, or it's this, or it's that. And how do we react to it? Negatively. Negatively. We don't even remember what they said. We remember the bad handshake. This is a nonverbal. This is the study of haptics, the study of touch. Let me tell you one handshake you must never do, unless you're with your grandmother. And it's called the politician's handshake. The politician's handshake involves both of your hands. And it's like this. Hi, how are you? Don't do that. Please don't do that. Nobody likes it. Politicians think it's really clever, but it's not. We've done the studies. Nobody likes it. It's okay with your grandmother. It's okay if you have like a 2-year-old. Hi, sweetie. But not with adults. And yet I still see people doing that. You shake hands, you make good eye contact, you mirror their handshake. You don't grimace, you don't make faces if it's not what you want. You know, you don't go, ew. You know, because it's sort of limp. No. Because handshakes are cultural. There's a lot of cultures where handshakes are very light. You make good eye contact. You take, after you shake, and while you're shaking hands, if you feel like you must touch the person additionally, you do it in the forearm or the elbow. Hi, how are you? And that's it. Don't do this. They're not your relatives. I know, some of you are in disagreement. Get over it. But that's what the research tells us. You shake hands, take a step back. What? Yes. You shake hands, take a step back, and move slightly to the right or to the left. Why? Because we are all sensitive to space. How many of you have talked to someone and they stood too close to you? Once again, ew, right? They're just too close to you. They make you feel uncomfortable. This causes, again, limbic hijacking. So by shaking hands, taking a small step back and to the side, you're creating space, and thus you're creating comfort. Allow them now to adjust themselves. They may want to step a little closer, or they may want to move even further away. If they move further away, you know this person needs a lot of space. That's how they're comfortable. But don't charge forward, because then you're chasing each other all over the room. And I've seen that too. So now we're exercising what Daniel Goleman was talking about when he talked about emotional and social intelligence. And in fact, what this lecture is about is nonverbal intelligence. How do we use our bodies and our observations to elevate our understanding and to communicate more effectively? That's what I use it for. I'll give you an example. You're talking to someone, and as they're talking, you see their hands are doing this. Let's all do this together. All right? So we know what this is. We're going to Disney. Right? We get excited. Children do this. In fact, have you ever noticed how children get happy feet? Right? We get happy feet too. We get excited too. And our hands get excited, and then they get sad. This is a pacifier, in the same way that wringing our hands is a pacifier. But here's something that's interesting that very few people in the world know. Very few people. And I'm going to share this with you today. Take your hands, spread your fingers, interlace your fingers, and now rub them like this. You may not be aware of this, but our brains reserve this behavior, not use, reserve this behavior for when things are really stressful. When things are really bad, you'll see people go, ooh. And if you see people doing this, things really are bad, because we actually reserve this behavior, which gives us greater tactile touch, for when things are really bad. I'm always fascinated by things like this because, for instance, when we look at behaviors that are very honest, very truthful behaviors, this is one of them. And how do we know that these are very honest behaviors? Let me give you an example. Have you ever noticed when you talk to somebody and say, hey, Jack, how about helping me move this weekend? And they go, yeah, I'd love to. And they block their eyes. You see, eye blocking behavior, right? We talked about squinting, something negative. Eye blocking behavior is literally blocking it out. Or the eyelids come down, you're talking about a subject, and they take a long time to come up. There are issues there. And when we hear things we don't like, we tend to cover our eyes. Oh my goodness. Now here's why it's accurate. When we study children that are born blind and they've never seen, they cover their eyes when they hear things they don't like. That means this is very old. This is very ancient. This is part of our paleo circuits in our brains, that we evolved to block things that we don't like, whether we see it or we hear it. And that's how we study authenticity of behavior, such as this behavior. And there's any number of behaviors that we do to demonstrate discomfort. And most of them, as I said, involve things such as self-touching and so forth. But our lips demonstrate this too. Now, I talked about lip biting, right? What about disappearing lips? Just look at anybody testifying before Congress and their lips have been sucked out of their face. They're just gone. And you say, what happened? The minute someone's lips disappear, they're under stress. They're bothered by something. Full lips, warm lips, lips full of blood, vasodilation, extreme comfort. When we're stressed, when we're concerned, or we have issues, our lips disappear. And you see it. You see it as a straight line. I don't know. Even babies do it. But if you see someone's lips disappear and the corners of the mouth come down, it's hard to do. It's very hard to do. But if the corners come down like this, deep emotional distress, because it's very hard to produce this behavior unless the brain is really emotionally distraught. Now, well, we've talked about negative things. What about positive things? Well, when we feel positive about things, we defy gravity. I call it gravity-defying behaviors. So you walk through the door and I recognize you and you recognize me and we both arch our eyebrows and we go, hey! You see, we defy gravity. And the reason we do it is we're willing to burn blood sugars for each other because we care about each other. And when we don't, we just go, how you doing? Right? And so when we're greeted like this, which by the way I highly encourage you, if you're in business or with your own children or family, defy gravity. Go, hey, you'll feel so much different. You'll feel so much different. And we defy gravity up and out. That's why when somebody's approaching us and we put our arms out, come. It makes us feel really good. Versus, get over here. And you see the difference. Or even when we're talking, and you see the person literally levitating, defying gravity. Very excited, very excited. You see, gravity-defying behaviors are the only way we have of putting exclamation points on the things that we feel strong about. So when we look at a young baby and we say, oh, I really like you, that doesn't register as well as when we go like this. And it goes to that part of the brain that says, this person cares about me. It's extremely powerful, this behavior. Gravity defiers. Imagine your customers coming through that door. And it's, hey, how are you? And you're doing something else. Versus, hey, thank you for coming. You see, you're contributing to something that's extremely powerful. You're contributing to what's called psychological comfort. And we humans thrive on psychological comfort. The people we hang around with, we choose because they provide psychological comfort. Nobody wakes up in the morning and says, oh, I think I'll hang out with Harry because he makes me miserable. Some people do. most of us begin to call them away. As I often say, as I get older, I have fewer friends, but I have better friends, because I am getting rid of everybody that causes me psychological discomfort. And we thrive when there's psychological comfort. We are healthier when there's psychological comfort. You don't get as many colds, you don't get as many diseases when you are psychologically comfortable. Not rich, not wealthy, but just with psychological comfort. And we transmit psychological comfort to each other in how we greet each other, in how we associate, the frequency of our touch, how we look at each other, how quickly we respond to each other, and our reactions to what others say about us. Someone talks to us, we tilt our head, we're pensive, okay. And we immediately undertake to help them. Think about all the nonverbals that went on here. I listened empathetically, I tilted my head. I encapsulated that which they needed done, and then I immediately ran off to do it. Here's something few people understand. Your movement to action is a nonverbal. When you move to action, it says, I care about you. At around 4 to 6 weeks, babies begin to, and I suspect it may be earlier, but it's very well studied, that at around 4 to 6 weeks, babies already know which parent or which sibling will move to action on their behalf. And sometimes they won't waste their time with this person because they're clueless. But they know that this one moves to action on their behalf. And this is why when you go to the counter and you say, I have a problem with this product or that product, and they don't move to action, you walk away angry, upset, with psychological discomfort. And yet, if that person had taken the time to just merely move to action, I'll make that call for you. Let me attend to this right now. Let me go in the back real quick. If they had done that, they would contribute to your psychological comfort, which, by the way, we really only can help each other with non-verbally. And you would walk away from there feeling much better, much happier. Something to remember. When we have positive events in our lives, we tend to tell about 8 people. When we have negative events in our lives, we tend to tell about 22 people on average. Now here's the real catch with that. Real negative things we hold on to for about 15 to 20 years. Oh yes. I don't have to go around the room. I can ask you about any negative event that you've had, and some of you can go back to the 70s, the 60s, 10 years ago, 8 years ago. That's how long it stays with us, because it goes to that part of the brain where we remember, don't touch the stove. And because we don't relearn that, we learn it once, it goes to that nice little area of the hippocampus. We remember negative things far longer than positive things. And so we don't like negative events. In the same way that we shouldn't transmit negative things. And how do we transmit negative things? Well, oftentimes it's not the words, it's the nonverbals. The making of a fist when somebody's talking to us. We talked about that rigid neck. Right? Ventral denial, turning away from people, even children. Go away. I've seen this, I've studied this. It's incredible how often we see these behaviors. Oh, just go over there, and we're turning away. And we think, this has no consequence. This is sheer nonsense. This is sheer nonsense. Everything we do has consequences. Because we as a species are constantly transmitting information. We can't opt out of this. You ever see somebody standing there and they've tucked their thumbs into their pockets and their fingers are sticking out? They lack confidence. They might as well say, my mother makes my lunch and sends me to school every day. And I've seen grown men do this, not realizing that we tuck our thumbs away when we're insecure. Our hands are powerful transmitters, extremely powerful transmitters. Let's all of us do a steeple. The steeple is the most powerful behavior that we have on this planet to communicate to each other. To communicate to each other that we're confident. We have no other behavior to communicate that. And so when you see someone and they feel really confident about what they're talking about, you see them steepling. And when they're not, it disappears. And it's fascinating to me to watch children who are blind talking to each other confidently, and they're steepling. And the other child can't even see it. And yet it's going on. And that's the beauty of nonverbals. That we're constantly transmitting, that it's reflexive, that it really communicates what we feel. Take, for instance, shoulder raises. Right? When we don't know something, we go, I don't know. And yet we ask somebody that works for us and we say, will that be done by July? And they go, I think so. No, it's not. And you see one shoulder rise towards the ear. They lack confidence. So I want you to think about these things. I want you to take this information with you. I don't want it to be dormant. I want you, not later today, I want you right now to begin to apply this. Everyone you run into, be thinking about comfort and discomfort. For what purpose? For better communications, so that we can be more empathetic. And what you will find is that you will suddenly see things you've never seen before. And people will notice that you are more observant and more caring. But even more importantly, and this is what's magical about this and so powerful, is this contributes to your psychological comfort and their psychological comfort because you are empathetically feeling what they sense, what they fear, what they desire. And these are not small matters. So I thank you for coming here today. I thank you for your attention. I thank you for wanting to keep that brain, that cherished brain that we have, active and learning and sponge-like. And I hope that you'll put these things to work right now, both in your personal life and in your work life. And reward yourself by knowing what very few people on this planet actually know. Thank you very much. Are there any questions that you would like answered? And I know some of you, just from your body language, that you do. Yes, sir. I'll start with you. Yes, in the blue. Well, I'll just repeat what they said. Yep.
I guess a basic question is nonverbal communication is very deep in the brain, and it's sort of subtext everything we do.
Yes.
Why do you think we're so maybe unconscious of the reception of a lot of this?
Yeah, that's a very good question. And the question is, if this is in such a deep and profound area of the brain, we've evolved with this because for millions of years, we, even proto-humans, communicated non-verbally. We only developed speech in the last maybe 80,000 years. Why is it that we don't pay more attention to it? It is simply this. How often have we been told, don't stare, don't make that face, put on a party smile, smile, don't reveal how you really feel. Why? Because in essence, lying is a tool of social survival. We can't say to somebody, that's your baby? We can't do that. We have to actually muster the courage sometimes and go, what a cutie, as we hard swallow and so forth. Because you see, lying is a tool of social survival. And so we mask a lot of sentiments. Doctors have to mask what they see. They see somebody, they've opened them up, they know they have cancer, it's terminal. They have to mask how they feel. I can't tell you how many times as an FBI agent I've come on some pretty gruesome things, and now I have to advise notify the family. And I'm thinking, okay, you're going to have to do a world-class presentation here, like an actor, because this is horrible. And so we have to, and so we learn to ignore things. We learn to ignore things. Yes, sir. And then.
Could you comment on the connection or disconnection between neuro-linguistic programming and people that just naturally have it, where they want to care and they just have the right body language because they're doing the right thing?
Yeah, the question is about neuro-linguistic programming and caring. NLP is something that was developed in the 70s. If you've noticed, there's not a lot of science. There's not a lot of scientists, true scientists, that talk about NLP. And it's something that I don't teach because in the FBI you can't testify to or do anything that you can't support by science. So I'm not an expert in the area. But what I do know about NLP, and that has to do with mirroring, right? We have this area called F5 in our brain, which is the mirror neurons. And from the time we are in the uterus, we are very sensitive to mirroring. In fact, babies, we learned this last year for the first time. A French baby cries in a different lilt than a German baby. So already in the uterus, in utero, our mirror neurons are already picking up on the native tongue, so that at birth, we already begin the process of mirroring, and of course by 78 hours, the baby already can smile when we smile and purse their lips when we purse our lips, and that's how we learn. Now, how do we use these, forget the NLP stuff, but how do we use mirroring? That's how we create comfort. That's how we create comfort. So this lady's tilting her head. Well, I'm going to tilt my head. And I know that this will contribute to psychological comfort. And you see it. You see it with somebody they're talking to you and they're like this versus somebody that's standing there with arms akimbo. And you say, there's an issue there. Well, we don't have symmetry. We're not mirroring each other. And that's why a relationship, I'm often asked about elderly people that have been long together and they're sitting in the car but they're not communicating. And the question is, are they contented? Yes. They're mirroring each other. They see the same thing and they're having the same thought. It's exquisitely elegant. Mirroring. Now, you had a question, sir.
You touched on the part about eyes, and a lot of the books will talk about it. If you're talking to someone, if you look up to the right, the left, and stuff.
Yeah, what was the technical term I used earlier? Right. The question, thank you. The question is about looking up and to the left and look. Here's the science. Here's the science, not the stuff that's in books. The science says that we process information by looking in different directions. So if I asked you to multiply 58 times 3 times 9, you will all look in different ways. Some of you will look down, across. But here's what's interesting. If I ask you a series of questions, maybe you look up and to your left for past memory recall, but then you begin to question why I'm asking you the questions, your eyes will go in a different direction. So I tell people IQ behavior is only useful in that the person is processing information. It is certainly not indicative of deception because there is no Pinocchio effect. There is, we didn't have time to talk about this, but there is no, and this may be one for the future of doing a video just on deception, there is no single behavior, none, zero, indicative of deception, none. And if anybody tells you that there is, they don't know what they're talking about. They absolutely do not. There is not one behavior indicative of deception. There are behaviors indicative of discomfort. There are behaviors indicative of tension as a result of a question that's asked. And I certainly did use this in the FBI, right? And those of you who know my work know about the case in Yuma, Arizona, where this guy stabbed another guy with an ice pick, and nobody knew what weapon was used except him. And so when I had him sitting in front of me, and I said, okay, so you're telling me you didn't do it, but if you had done it, would you have used a machete? No. Would you have used a machine gun? No. Would you have used an ice pick? Why? Because only ice pick had weight. And the minute he heard that, he closed his eyes, he tucked his chin in. And I said, that's what you used, wasn't it? And he says, yeah. That's how you use this stuff. To detect deception, this is what I did for a living. Don't let anyone tell you that there are behaviors indicative of deception. The science does not support it. And even those who have to do work with deception, the research since 1986 with Paul Ekman, replicated multiple times by Aldert Vree, Morabian, other people, shows that we're no better than chance. You might as well take a coin, toss it in the air, and say, you're lying. You're telling the truth. And that's how we end up with people who think they can detect deception. We end up with 268 DNA exonerations. I wrote an article for Psychology Today where I talked about a lot of people claim they can detect the truth, or they can detect a lie, but they don't know how to detect the truth. So be very careful, because this is what I did for a living.
Is there a way to detect the truth?
Well, there is. Is there a way to detect the truth? What I focused on, and you may find this surprising, I never focused on deception. I assumed everybody was going to lie to me because I'm the FBI. It's like, how many of you told your mothers everything you've ever done? Don't Do not tell your parents whatever you did in your life because they think you're up here. Well, I didn't think anybody was going to tell me the truth. But here's what I looked for. What questions did I ask that bothered them? And that leads me to the truth. So in the case of those of you who have read my books, because there's 11 of them now, and Rod Ramsey, who's sitting there, and I'm talking to him, he's got a cigarette in his hand, and every time I mention the name of Clyde Conrad, that cigarette shook like a needle on a polygraph. That told me there's something going on here, because every time I mention the name, that cigarette shakes. And sure enough, for 5 years, these guys had spied against the United States and Germany. So it's not about the truth. If you spend your time saying, oh, he's lying, he's telling you the truth, you're going to spend a lot of blood sugar, a lot of time, and you're only going to be 50-50. You're only going to be 50-50 because that's what science tells us. So why spend time on it? If somebody comes in and you see these indicators of discomfort when you ask a question, then the question is why? Why is it that when I ask you if it's going to be done next week, you're rubbing your neck and scratching and doing this and doing that? Well, maybe the supplier isn't going to guarantee the stuff. Maybe it's something so simple. I'll give you a great example. I worked mostly counterintelligence. I was a spy catcher. And one day I was asked to assist on a white-collar crime case. Do you guys want to hear this? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I'm sitting with this woman in front of me. And usually the first half hour of an interview, we use it to calm the person down because, they're being interviewed by the FBI. And that in itself is stressful. But as time passes, she's becoming more stressed. At first I'm seeing the withdrawal. Now she's got her purse on her lap. She's no longer leaning forward. Her lips are compressed. She's masticating. Right? Now she's touching her neck. Stress is increasing. And I've just begun the interview, and finally, because I think I'm pretty clever, and I say, ma'am, you look like you need something to get off your shoulders. And she says, oh, Mr. Navarro, thank God, because when I parked downstairs, I only had 2 quarters and the meter's running out. What does that tell us? I made all the right observations, but what was causing the discomfort? She didn't want to get a ticket. And this is what's happened in our criminal justice system when we attribute deception to things. I used to do jury consulting. And I used to talk to jurors after a trial, and they would say, well, I just didn't believe him. And I said, well, why didn't you believe him? Well, I heard long ago that if you touch your nose or your mouth while you're talking, that you're lying. And that's our judicial system based on that? Some tripe that you heard? Because here's the truth. Both the honest and the dishonest will do the same behavior depending on whether or not they're under stress. And if you've ever testified in court, you're nervous. You're absolutely nervous. Why? Because it's not normal. It has nothing to do with guilty knowledge. It has to do with stress. You want to add stress to an interview? Bring in 3 police officers instead of 1. You want to add stress to an interview? Make sure that the person that's being interviewed can see your weapon. And we actually see blood pressure increase, and we see the haptics, the self-touching increase. And you say, and that's just from the mere presence of people? Yes. Now here's what's scary. Of those 268 DNA exonerations that I am familiar with, where these people actually didn't do it, they actually found the person later on, and it was their DNA, not the person who sat in jail. Fully 1/4, 25% admitted to doing it just to end the stress of the interview. That's frightening. And I tell you this as a practitioner, not somebody that watches TV. Because I've interviewed terrorists, I've interviewed psychopaths, I've interviewed killers, I've interviewed people who had sex with, 18-month-old babies, and I've interviewed, spies. I'm not telling you this because I heard about it, as so often you hear. Somebody talking with expertise. Well, they've never done an interview. I'm telling you because I was there. It's very scary stuff. You have a question, sir?
If you're in a business proposal and you notice somebody being uncomfortable, what would you recommend? Stop immediately and deal with it?
That's a great question. So you're in a business meeting and you notice a certain amount of discomfort. And my recommendation is don't go any further. At that point, say, well, what do you think so far? Here's why. Let's say I'm making a proposal to you about this object. Right? I'm selling you this object. And you're showing me all the signs of discomfort. Your feet are turned towards the door. You're ventrally denying me. Every time I say something, you're scratching your neck. Here's what I'm doing. I'm further irritating you because now you not only like my product, I know that, I can see it, but I'm wasting your time. So now you've multiplied psychological discomfort. And that's something you've got to avoid. That's why we use this stuff. How more precious it is to you for me to jump in and say, Mr. Jones or Mr. Rodriguez, well, what do you think so far? Well, it really doesn't match what we're trying to do here. Okay, well, is there anything about it that you like? Always ask people for their opinion. But to let this go on, I see this in court all the time. We're at sidebar, the attorneys are yapping away, and the judge is sitting there going, what's he saying? I don't agree with you, I don't agree with you, I don't agree with you. Obviously, they need to enter things into the record. But boy, do so at your own peril, because the judge is saying the whole time, I disagree with both of you, gentlemen or ladies. Any other questions? Sir?
Does body language work backwards? Like if you want to exude confidence, if you do some of the things that are confident exuding, does it actually help your comfort level?
This is a great question. Can you use body language to change, for instance, your confidence and so forth? Absolutely. In fact, those of you who have been in the military know that this is what they do with officers. They make officers walk a certain way, talk a certain way, because in doing that, it transmits to other people that they feel confident. Even simple things as doing gravity-defying behaviors when you're feeling low, right? So you tell somebody, I want you to go from this point to that point, but I want you to levitate as you go. When you get to the end point and you ask them, well, how do you feel now? You'll notice that they actually will say, I feel better. And why is that? Because of the circuitry of the brain. You see, the brain, which is accustomed to receiving positive things when you defy gravity, even though you're feeling down, now because you're doing it, the circuit comes back, and so now you feel better about it. So you can actually act your way into feeling better. Now, obviously, the clinically depressed would have an extremely hard time with this. But I know, because I go around the world speaking, I know a lot of speakers that will actually do gravity-defying behaviors right before they go on to make sure that that energy levels up because of that circuit that we have. Try it. Try it.
Any comments on the show, Lightning?
Yeah, I've only seen the show once. It's based on Paul Ekman's work. However, the similarities with my own life are, kind of interesting. But Paul Ekman's behind it. The science is pretty accurate, but what they're preaching is not. It's very difficult to tell when, if you ask me, well, do you have 7 children or 3 children? I don't know, and does it matter? I think it's very tough to detect deception. I talk about it in my books because people ask about it. I would rather you concentrate on comfort and discomfort. You'll be much better off. You'll find things. And even if somebody is lying, right? So where were you last night? I was with the boys, right? Okay. Now what do you got? So what, are you going to interrogate them? I mean, this is where you have to be careful, where if you know there's issues there, pursue it. But there are more elegant ways to pursue information than, oh, he's lying. Now what? I'm not sure you're aware of this, that even if you detect deception, let's say, I'm talking to you and you lie to me, you can't introduce that into court. We have a right, Fifth Amendment, right? So you can't introduce it into court. Yes, she lied, and you can't introduce that. She said certain things and it led me this way and I found these things, but you can't, she lied to me. Yeah, so what? There is no law that says, you can't lie. Oh, wait a minute. Let me ask this because you've already, yeah.
Is there any way we can share this with children? I'm grandma of an 8-year-old and I'm thinking...
That's a great question. Can we share this with children? I insist that you share this with children. I wrote an article for Psychology Today, which you can go online and find, of the 10 things that every parent should teach a child about body language. And one of them was that all body language has meaning. Because there's a lot of people who say, oh, that doesn't mean this or it doesn't mean that. That's tripe. And number 2, to be sensitive to their feelings. If they don't want to get on that bus, if they don't want to get into that elevator, if they don't feel comfortable with somebody, this is what Gavin de Becker was talking about in his book, The Gift of Fear. Respect that. Because that's the limbic brain kicking in and saying, maybe I shouldn't get in there. And there's, 8 other things in there. But there are many things that we can teach children. Why? So that they can be more empathetic. Because the more social intelligence that we have, the higher your achievement in life. When they do studies about who has achieved the most, it's the person who has had the highest EQ quotient, emotional intelligence. Not the personality who can sit in front of the brain, of the computer and do those are the oddities. But the average person who can master emotional, social intelligence, those are the people that are going to make it. Those are the ones that can bring people together. That's the power of this stuff. And the beauty of it is we all possess it. You don't have to go out and buy it. You don't have to spend money to do this. You all possess it. It's just a matter of exercising it, implementing it, observing, and attaching meaning to what you observe. There was a, yes ma'am?
There's something, I think it's called Asperger's syndrome.
Asperger's, yeah.
Okay, where a person has a deficit
Yep.
in processing body language. And when you gave that example of somebody, we're walking out in the street, somebody stops, everybody stops. Can someone who would keep going because they're semi-oblivious to what's happening around them be
Taught this thing?
Yes.
Yeah, so the question is, can children that, for instance, have these deficits, the Asperger's syndrome, and what's the other popular one? What's that? Autism. Autistic children. I get emails all the time from autistic parents. Yes, what you can do is teach them to cognitively recognize things and say, when you see the squinting of the eyes, when you see the compressed lips, when you see somebody freeze, pay attention because something is wrong. And so while we interpret this subconsciously, we have to teach children this. And they can learn it by cognition. By cognition, yeah. How many of you have noticed that I don't point like this, that I point like this? Don't ever point to anybody with your finger. Nobody likes it anywhere in the world. If you have to point, use your hand. Use your palm, complete palm. This causes psychological comfort. This doesn't. In the same way that when you touch people with your full hand, palmar touching, because when we don't like each other, we touch each other with our fingertips. And that's why when your boss comes along and says, oh, you did a really great job, you do this. Because when we really care about people, we use the full palm. We use our full palm. And I see parents who really, they're struggling with their children, touching them with their fingertips. Don't do that. Don't do that because the brain is registering this. And that's why when, that parent comes and touches us with that full palm, we feel differently. Any other question about, yes, ma'am?
Can you go through the creating palm up or palm down?
Yeah, that's a good question. Palm up, palm down. You see in a lot of cultures people do this, they do this. This is called the rogatory position of the hands. When people give themselves up, when they plead to be believed, they tend to do this, right? When we are emphatic, we turn our palms down. In fact, we know that liars can't do this. Liars can't do this. I didn't do it. What you usually see from liars is like in the Peterson case, that famous case out in LA, he says, I had nothing to do with her disappearance. You see no emphasis. You see, emphasis comes from the limbic brain. And liars know how to tell the truth, but they don't know how to emphasize. So they do it palm up. So anytime I see a formal declarative statement, I didn't do it, if I see it palm up, I have my doubts. If I see it emphatic palms down, then I say, okay, maybe. And that's it. And that's it, because I corroborate everything. Everything. So, anything else? Well, you've all asked great questions. I thank you for your time. I thank you for your attention. And I appreciate your great questions. Thank you.